Oh, welcome to Off the Record with Randall, Jeremy, the JJ Appreciation Saturday, and Iowa State could sue you for using D. They own the copyright to D. They also. Special night, man. I cannot tell y'all how excited I am about this. Over the next month and a half, kind of killing some time to football season. Howie came up with this, and I give him all the credit in the world. He has set up a contest between me and the JJ Appreciation Society, and we're going to do the top tag teams in the wrestling. Well, over the next few weeks, we'll do tonight we'll do the NWA, then we're going to do the WWE, then the WCW, then do the independent circle, which may be AWA, New Japan, ECW, just anybody we could come up that wasn't in there. I'm going to tell you real fast, and I'll let Jeremy tell you his side, and then Howie, you can take it over after this. I took this very serious, Jeremy. I probably spent 5 hours researching, and I'm so excited to do this. I'm gonna keep my list. I'm gonna compile my list, and at the end of it, I think you'll be surprised who comes out on the top at the end. But you could be number 2 in the NWA, but end up number 1 best tag team, because I'm going to score it like you do a college football poll. If you're second in this one, you get 9 points. And then at the end of it, I'm going to total everybody's points up, and where you land, that's where you're at. I took fan interaction, title achievement, and a little bit of who did I like. If I didn't like you, didn't get on my list.
Now,
Jeremy, what did you use?
Well, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. I had a little trouble getting my earphones to connect. So, yeah, I didn't go that deep, because at the end of the day, for me, it didn't matter how many titles they held. To me, it was, how did I feel?
That was a lot of mine.
Now that was my main criteria. So that even applies to if I hated them. Now, in retrospect, I can look and appreciate the fact that they were great heels, right?
I got at least 6 teams I hated on my list. So I have 4 that I hated.
Now, if they couldn't wrestle, I mean, if it was the Monkeys or something like that, I'm proud. You know what I mean? They did their job, but then they did do the job. But my main criteria, because I don't go hardly as far back as you do, Randall, because early 80s. Well, I'm not saying that, but I don't go that far back. Early 80s forward is kind of where I'm at. So, again, I don't have the extensive criteria that you do, but I just go by, hey, how you make me feel. Like Christian the other night, I hate him, but that's great. Great promos.
And I love Matt Hardy's line. Love it.
Yeah.
The thing about it too, and then we'll turn it over to Howie. My list, I have probably 3 teams whose main time of fame was the 60s and 70s. So by doing that, it gives a little different look. And I will also tell you.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I think Randall's list will change before we get done with this intro.
He's Dave LaGreca when it comes to his list.
There's only one wrestler on my list I have not seen wrestle in person. One wrestler I hadn't seen in person.
Wow.
So take it away, Howie Chaney.
Okay, what came up with this was us talking about wrestling a few weeks ago, and I got a phone call from Randall, and I said, "Hey, Randall, let me throw something out at you." I said, "I've got an idea." I said, "You and Jeremy are probably the 2 most knowledgeable people with wrestling that I know." I said, "What about we do a top 5 of singles competition, tag team competition, all that. And before I even got that stuff out, Randy's like, when are we going to do it? We're going to do it next week. You want to do it this week? He was excited about it.
I am.
So I actually changed it a little bit. Instead of doing top 5, we're actually doing top 10. 10 through 6 is going to be honorable mention, kind of like, and then your 5 through 1 will be your top 5 teams. 10 through 6 will be kind of not really a discussion type deal, but 5 through 1 will be discussion, debating on whether or not they should have been there or not. So, who wants to go first on their 10 through 6? Randy's so excited. Randy, you go first. 10 through 6.
Well, you shouldn't have limited me to 10 because the 10th place, I'll do my 10th and then we'll let Jeremy do it.
That sounds good.
Do your 10 through 6.
And I'll give you a little reason why. All the people that are tied for 10th are probably known better as individual wrestlers except one. But they were great teams. My tie at number 10.
Oh, Randy, hold on a second. Before we get started, this is NWA Tag Teams Top 10.
Yes, sir.
Let everybody out there know exactly what we're doing. Just NWA Top 10.
We're talking Jim Crockett, Mid-Atlantic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got out of that a little bit, but not far out of the South. I'll put it that way. Number 10, from Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, a 2-time World Tag Team Champion, Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat. Great babyface team back in the day that I love. Those are ones that Ricky Steamboat went on to great success. Jay Youngblood unfortunately died very early and did not have that success. My number 10, I just couldn't kick them out of it because they really should be my honorable mention. From the Double Cross Ranch in Amarillo, Texas, Dory Jr., Terry the Funk Brother.
So am I hearing this right? You got 2 number 10s?
Yeah, I had a tie.
Hey, you got to make it work somehow.
I had 11 teams that deserved to be on the list. So my number 10 is a tie. Ricky Steamboat, Jay Youngblood, and the Funk Brothers. Jeremy, go ahead.
I can't argue. Hey, look, I was thinking of Youngblood, Steamboat. I actually have Terry and Dory kind of on the outskirts right there. I have a longer list than 10, and I actually have Terry and Dory on that list. So I mean, I can't argue that they are any higher, but they deserve to be right there in that neighborhood for sure.
There.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I was very limited in my Terry and Dory Funk viewing. You know what I'm saying? I know I watched some matches, and of course that was years ago. But I know the reputation. Of course, you know, Terry being the more popular of the two, but Dory was a great worker and kind of accented the you know, so was Terry, but you know, he was the more technical guy, where Terry, you know, as we find out, was the wild man of the two. But yeah, that's pretty formidable.
Both held the NWA World Championship, and Dory held it for over 4 years. So
that's unbelievable.
Yep, you're 10.
What's your number 10, Jeremy?
My number 10. You're gonna laugh, and I really put it in here because I never watched them wrestle. But the Nature Boy Ric Flair and Greg the Hammer Valentine. I know they had some success as a tag team, some limited success, but I do have to. I wouldn't be right if I didn't put him and Greg the Hammer. Of course, Greg the Hammer can, you know, we could put him in any of the leagues, any of these that were. I mean, the WWE, WWF. Yeah, I mean, but I think that's I had to put them in there.
Yeah, if I was showing you on my notes, they got scratched off, but my original list when I was just brainstorming, they were one of my top 10.
Some reason I got a feeling this will not be the only time we hear Ric Flair's name tonight. But anyway, Let's go with number 9. Jeremy, give me your number 9.
All right, so number 9, uh, and you have to remember, I was a kid, uh, probably about 11 or 12 years old, so it was a big deal. Uh, Managed by Paul Jones, the Warlord and the Barbarian. Now, I look, I lost my mind when those two guys came out, and I won't reference the other tag team, but that feud was, I mean, that was monsters against monsters.
It
So,
was.
Paul Jones to me a little bit underrated as a manager, a little annoying, but he was a good heel manager, and perfect for those guys because neither one of those guys could talk. They went just extremely good on the microphone. So you have Paul Jones there, and dude, they had the look, man. I mean, those two, and their career spanned. I don't think that they never won the tag team titles. However, tag team like that, they didn't need a title. They really didn't. And so I just remember the all factor when I saw those guys. I was like, my God, these guys are big. So that's number 10 or number 9. I'm sorry.
They are another team that got scratched off of my list. But my number 9, I'm going back to probably the oldest team on this list. I was a kid when I saw them wrestle together. But if you do history a little bit, in 1960, they were the first team to hold the NWA tag team titles out of Chicago. They toured all over America as the World Tag Team Champions. They filled Madison Square Garden. They filled Atlanta. They filled Chicago. They filled LA. Then, famously, one of them settled and wrestled in the Chattanooga area for years. And I guarantee you, our grandparents and our parents, this was their favorite wrestler growing up. This was their Ric Flair. But I'll give you number 9, Jackie and Don Fargo.
Fargo. Ah, that's good. That's good.
So,
That's outstanding.
Randall, we'll go with number 8. What's your number 8 team?
all right, got to stop here. Number 8 made my list today. My number 8 is what actually bumped Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat off my list, because I was going through my list and I said, I feel like I left somebody off. And I really had trouble slotting this team. I had them anywhere from 4 to 8, but I settled with them at number 8. The greatest masked team in the NWA history to me, the Assassins. Joey Hamilton, Tom Renesto, the original Assassins. Of course, Jody Hamilton went on to carry on the Assassins with other partners. But Tom Renesto ended up being the booker in Mid-American Championship Wrestling based out of Chattanooga here. So Tom Renesto ended up, all that wrestling went on down at the Memorial Auditorium. It was out of the mind of Tom Renesto.
Wow. What a time.
Great time in wrestling. I used to come with my Uncle Leon, God rest his soul. We would go to Nicky's and get a hamburger and a Coke, then go over to the Memorial Auditorium and watch. Jackie Fargo was bigger than life to me. So that's my number. That's my number 9. And then at the same time in the area was the Mask Assassins. Everybody needed their evil team. So the Fargos and the Assassins wrestled so many times. But I love the Mask Assassins. Got to know, I don't know if y'all know, and I'll cut it off, Nick Patrick of WCW fame, the referee. I got to know Nick a little bit, is the son of Joey Hamilton, the original assassin. So
I did.
Know Nick a little bit. Got to hear his dad's story. It was awesome. So over to you, Jeremy.
So I think I've already fouled up. I gave you guys 2 the last time.
That's right. I gave
So
you.
You're good.
So
We got your number 8.
Okay, so all right, good. I was afraid I'd messed something up. All right,
8 and 7 this time.
Yeah,
So
you go number 8, then go number 7.
Okay, so I wanna talk about one of the 3-man teams. All right, unique concept. But I'm gonna put it number 8. I'm gonna put the Russians. I'm gonna put Ivan and Nikita Koloff with Crusher Khrushchev.
Nice. Very nice.
I like that one, and I like that one a lot. I like that one so much. You're about to hear about it. Go ahead.
All right, so this is why. This is why, because the heel factor. You got to think about 84, 85. The Cold War is still going on.
Yes.
You know, Ronald Reagan, you know, all those things, all these things are happening. You know, Chernobyl took place and you know, in the 86, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. So you got to think about all. And when I saw those Russians, man, I'm like, dang, those Russians, you know, and they were dominant. Of course, you know, Ivan, long career, really good heel, good wrestler, stiff. I wouldn't want to get in the ring with Ivan Koloff. And then you throw in Nikita, who, you know, we know now is a very successful evangelist, which I've heard him, you know, he just had that look, dude. Chatoeta, you know, Tony Schiavone. You know, he had the. Yeah, I mean, I really thought they were Russians. I didn't know he was from North Carolina. So, you know, and then you throw Khrushchev in there, which here's the only thing I don't like about that. He didn't even try a Russian accent. So it's really hard for me to believe that Crusher Khrushchev, who I mean, is there a better Russian name than Crusher Khrushchev? He sounded like me or you talking. So you know, in retrospect, that, you know, but those 3, any combination of the 2, very formidable tag team. Really, I mean, and hey, look, throw in a singles with Koloff, Magnum TA, and Nikita Koloff. Oh my gosh! But they didn't need the titles either, even though they held, I believe it was the U.S. heavyweight titles, I think. But they didn't need them. Heels, booze. I mean, you get booze. So all right, so that's on that one. So that's the Russians. Number 7. Both of these guys had great singles career. One of them is still got a career. I'm talking about Sting and Luger. Lex Luger and Sting. So, total package, you know, yes, he was a little, you know, he lacked a little bit, but God, the guy looked fantastic. He looked like $1 billion. And then you got Sting in there, and you know, they were the young tag team, the full of energy. I just thought they were awesome. I mean, I've always been a Sting fan. Sting fan anyway. So that's number 7 for me. I think they held the NWA tag team titles a couple of times at least that I know of.
They did, and you may hear their name on my WCW list just because I more closely associate them with WCW.
Right.
My number 7 team is the Russians, Ivan and Crusher Khrushchev. Now, and I can clean this Crusher Khrushchev thing up for you. He was an American, and he turned his back on America to join the Russians.
See, I missed that.
Yeah, that was like, you had to have Mid-Atlantic TV when they first formed. He even had a tattoo of an eagle turning its back on his arm. So it was pretty in-depth. But I want to expand on that more. Ivan Koloff, I got to train with Ivan when I was trying to get into wrestling. He is also the smartest man I ever met as far as telling you the truth. And he told me, this ain't for you. So that like you're about to get your college degree. You're big, but you're not athletic. This is not for you. Go have a great life. This is a tough life. And I loved Ivan Koloff. And Ivan is probably forgotten, was the original person who took the WWF title off of Bruno Sammartino. So that makes Ivan was a legend. The Russians we've cut, and great, you're right. Nikita was the young superstar. Barry Dorso as Kusher Khrushchev will be on my list again when we get to the WWF. I don't think there's a doubt.
The Repo Man.
I'm really surprised. I'm really surprised that it took us 4 picks to get to having the same tag teams on both lists. You know, I really thought it would be a little bit further along, but it took 4 picks. So
well, Randall went way back, man. He went way back.
So Randall, let's go with number 6.
Number 6, going way back. Again, one of the greatest tag team feuds in history was with the Funk Brothers. They also famously turned heel after a career of being faces to feud with Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood over the NWA territory, NWA World Tag Team Championship in the Mid-Atlantic territory. One of the brothers, former world heavyweight champion, I give you Jack and Jerry, the Briscoe brothers. 7.
Nice. Very good.
Hey, I'm dealing, man. I'm dealing.
Nice.
Bootleg Double J. Who's your number 16?
Number 6. Back to the 3-man tag. I think y'all know where I'm going with this. Michael P.S. Hayes, Buddy Jack Roberts, and Chattanooga, if I'm right, Chattanooga's own Terry Gordy, or used to ride the school bus with his cousin or with his nephew. His name was Curtis Gordy, if you're out there. Curtis Gordy. The Freebirds. Here's what I loved about the Freebirds. Gordy could work. Big man. Was he about 6'5", 300 pounds, somewhere in that neighborhood?
Yeah,
Big man could work. Buddy Jack could work. Underrated. And then you had Michael Hayes. And Michael Hayes was all personality. It worked because they had everything. It may have been 3 guys, but they had everything. Michael Hayes, you know, I was listening to something the other day, and, you know, he cut a promo. It's probably around 87, something like that. I may have got it confused with something else, but he was, you know, he wanted to challenge Ric Flair for the title, you know, independently, but from the Freebirds. But Freebirds, this version, not Jimmy Jam and Michael P.S. Hayes. I'm talking about this version.
Clearly.
Yes. Look, feuding with the Von Erichs. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's like picking on God in Texas when you jump on the Von Erichs, man, you're in trouble. But to me, they were unique. They were cool at the time. Now, you know, if you look back and you see all the rebel flags and all that stuff, you know, people take issue with that now. But they had it. And one of the promos I listened to, he was talking about, they said we couldn't cut an album. We did. They said we couldn't have a concert. We did. You know, they were able to do so much. And, you know, Terry left us early. Buddy Jack, same there. And then you still have Michael. Michael's still going. Yeah, I think he's second. I'm wondering if who will live longer, him or Rick. You know, they were cool. They were just cool.
All right,
I,
we're at the number 5 spot now. Randall, you want to get that commercial in real quick before we go top 5?
Yeah, let's do that. We got some comments too. I can't show that one.
oh, thank
Hey,
you.
I'll say it real fast too. We're 25 minutes in. Everybody knows Reckless Speculation. Robbie Davis, my friend, friend of the network, friend of all of us, is and he don't push it on here. He is an attorney with Davis, Kessler, and Davis, and they're currently in the final nominations of the best of Chattanooga. And this is a little something they've released, and just let it play, and we'll be back in about 15 seconds.
When you are hurt, we are here to help.
Right now, we need your help.
Vote for Davis, Kessler, and Davis for the best personal injury law firm.
Voting is now open at bestofchat.com.
You know, we give a lot of entertainment for free on here. Go support Robbie and his endeavors. So anyway,
All right, gentlemen.
number 5, right? Is it on me?
Yes, sir. We're at number 5. Here's what I'd like to do is have a debate, then a counter debate, whether or not that tag team should be there or not. Randall, you're up.
All right. At number 5, the probably dominant tag team of the 70s and 80s in the NWA. What gave birth to the Four Horsemen was the storyline of Ric Flair being the cousins of the Anderson brothers. And I give you at number 5, the original Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Ole Anderson, Gene Anderson, 6 times NWA World Tag Team Champions, Booker, Ole Anderson, Booker in Atlanta and Mid-Atlantic at the same time. At one point, I had them as the number 1 tag team in this list. But when I settled down and I wrote it out, what gave birth to the biggest revolution in pro wrestling was Gene retired, Iron comes on, they continue the storyline with Ric Flair as their so-called cousin, bring Tully in, the Andersons, Tully, Ric Flair become woo, and we all know what that becomes. But the first incarnation was actually 3 brothers, and that being Ole, Gene, and their kayfabe brother Lars. Then they brought in their nephew Iron. Great story.
I agree. Jeremy, how you feel about that?
Well, I mean, no, I again, I caught the tail end of Gene, as far as seeing him, and I didn't watch him wrestle much. So, I'm more familiar with Ole and Arn, of course. But man, they were, I know Ole was tough, and no, I've heard Gene's stories, and for me, they kind of exemplified a tag team in that era for sure. They beat the holy crap out of you.
And they had such good opponents to work with too. They made stars out of other guys.
So I will say this, on a negative there, and again, my criteria was different. And of course, had I been present to watch, at least a window of their careers and their tag team together, I might feel differently. To me, though, there was not really that much impressive about the guys as far as charisma. They just beat the crap out of people, and they wasn't impressive looking. They didn't have Gene was my remembrance of Gene was right at the end of his career he had a little shake to him, and so I wasn't really impressed. Now, like I said, had I saw them at their genesis and when they were younger, I would probably feel different. But I just really, I'm like, these guys, they're tough, no doubt, legit tough. But I just wouldn't. They didn't make me feel one way or the other.
Gene looked that way when he was young too. I'll just go ahead and tell you. I will throw you one thing that they did that I thought was the greatest thing in tag team wrestling. They always worked the arm, and that was the storyline. And they would arm bar, they would slam them on the arm, and they'd make everybody submit. And I don't know why more tag teams don't do that. That was just a great storyline.
Good deal. All right, Jeremy. Let's see your number 5.
Okay. The reason I laughed a while ago was because Randall's already mentioned my number 5, and
Well,
it was before.
I haven't really saw Randall's list, but I'm pretty sure you already mentioned one of his. But go ahead.
Yeah. So this is going from, and again, my main criteria was how did they make me feel? How do I feel about them? This one is a little different because I didn't have the experience. Just the same thing with Gene and Ole, I guess. Is that right? It was Gene and Ole.
Gene and Ole.
So I just threw one in here for nostalgia, just for the simple fact of the number of titles they held. Right? I didn't get to watch them, but Jack and Jerry Briscoe. I had to put them in there because if you look at their accolades, they held every NWA tag team title there was to hold, and Jack being NWA World Champion at one time, and on top of it, these guys could whip tail. They were legit athletes. Very decorated collegiate athletes. As far as Jack, especially, Jack stuck out more than Jerry, I believe. But I mean, you look at the list, and I pulled the list up again just to look at it. I mean, North American Tag Team, NWA North American Tag Team Champions, NWA Southern. He was Southern Heavyweight Champion on his own. United States Tag Team Champion. Gosh, I mean, you just keep going and going. Georgia Tag Team Champions. Eastern States Heavyweight Champion for Jack on his own. And then they held the World Tag Team Champion, kind of the Mid-Atlantic version, 3 times with Jerry. So those two guys, and I'm kind of being a hypocrite here because I kind of knocked Gene and Ole. These guys were not impressive either. But they always stuck out to me because I've heard and read enough about, the Briscoes, and then more especially Jack's solo career. But look, I'm being a politician here or a hypocrite, so I'm just putting them in there though, because I feel like I had to go back to some old school tag team and have them in there because they deserve to be in there.
Okay, Randall, how do you feel about that?
If you could see this list, the Briscoes are number. I switched it from the list to put the Minnesota Wrecking Crew at number 5 and the Briscoes. Hey, let me tell you one thing about the Briscoes. Of course, I think they're a top 5. They were legitimate bad men too. All-American wrestlers at Oklahoma. I'll tell you something else. They're Native American.
Yes.
Cherokees, and they didn't play that part in wrestling. They didn't come out in headdresses. They were just Jack and Jerry Briscoe, bad men that really, really were just absolutely the toughest guys. I love Jack and Jerry. If I'd known he had them at number 5, I'd have had the Minnesota Wrecking Crew at 6. So that was one of the ones, if you remember me saying, I could switch 5 and 6, but 5 and 6 are 5 and 6 in my list. So that was exactly where I had them listed.
Let me just throw this out there. How would you like to see those two fight each other? Those two tag teams.
It was great. And, and the ironic part of it, I think we're going to be pretty close the rest of the way out. I think this started a run.
I have a feeling.
We're going to cross a lot of the same territory.
All right, let's get to it and see if we cross or not. JJ, number 4.
All right. You know what? Any tag team list would be incomplete without Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson. I couldn't stand them. I'll just go ahead and put it there. I hated them. I hated Tully Blanchard. You know, I didn't think he was all that good looking, and and never could understand why Baby Doll. Was it Baby Doll? I never could understand what the attraction was there. But listen, two of my favorite moves, period, and that is the slingshot suplex, right?
Yep.
And you want to guess?
The Brain Buster.
I love the spine buster.
Spine
When I
Buster.
see, well, even when I see it now, and it gets kind of glossed over, but when Arn Anderson hit that spine buster, man, that make you come out of your seat. So those guys, champions. Of course, we know they crossed over, and we'll probably talk about them maybe on another list. I'm not sure, but I couldn't stand them. They were heels. Arn Anderson is one of the best heel promos there ever was, and he had the look. And I know they wasn't really related, but he got that Gene Anderson gene because he looked like he was about 40 when he was 28. Yeah. But great tag team. Loved them. I mean, I hated them, but I appreciate the fact, they made me dislike them. Right, heels.
Randall, your thoughts?
I chose the Minnesota Wrecking Crew over the Brainbusters or Tully, simply because when you look at Tully and Arn's time together, it was very short. I mean, they were about a 2 or 3 year, and I'm not talking about the Horsemen, because a long time while they're in the Horsemen, it was Arn and Ole, and was either the world's TV champion or the U.S. champion. It really wasn't until they brought Luger in that Arn and Tully become a tag team. Now, I'm going to have Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard on my list, but I think you'll see them somewhere else where they were a tag team and a tag team only.
So without going into that, let me just say this. You have no idea how cool it was.
Oh, coolest heels.
To see those guys in the NWA.
Yeah.
And then to see them elsewhere. That was the coolest. To me, that was so cool to see those guys. And we'll talk about that another time.
In my head, and I can't get it out of my head, Tully and Arn is a WWE tag team. And I know that's horrible, but they were the Horsemen. I think of them as individuals in WCW and NWA.
That's blasphemy, Randall. That's blasphemous. No, I mean, I get what you're saying.
If I think of Arn Anderson, I know most people think of him as a tag teamer. I think of him as the world's greatest, world's TV champion. That's my first thought. So.
But think about this, though. These guys are still contributing to the wrestling business today. Both of them.
They're going to be on my list. Just like this one.
Great. Tully Blanchard can still talk, and Arn can too. They're just so good.
One other point I will make, I don't even think they were the best tag team in the Horsemen, because my favorite match was Barry Windham and Ric Flair as a tag team against somebody else on my list.
Yes.
My favorite match of all time, we're going to run into probably here about number 3.
All right, let's hear your number 4 then.
Number 4. Well, all I'm going to say is
Oh my goodness.
And they will be on another list. And they'll probably be number one on my other list. Get to
Wow.
that. Oh, but I'm not talking about any version other than Michael P.S. Hayde, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, Buddy Jack Roberts, the Batless Freebirds. And here's what I love. And Jeremy's already hit on it. Every man in that audience thought they could kick Buddy Jack's ass. Every woman in that audience thought Michael Hayes was the prettiest I've ever seen. And every man in that audience wouldn't go out back with Terry Gordy on their best night because he was the best in that arena.
No, sir.
A little history, and I don't know if everybody knows this. I actually saw Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes in 1979 at the Memorial Auditorium as Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes. Wrestled Bill Dundee and Jerry Lawler.
Nice.
It was great. They weren't the Freebirds. They were a version of the Freebirds that hadn't flown yet. They'd go to Memphis and start becoming the Freebirds. And then the famous Memphis, which is, we're going to hear a lot about it. There was a huge exchange of talent at Memphis and New Orleans. And a lot of things got changed. And the Freebirds end up working for Bill Watts down in the mid. And he hated Michael Hayes' work. Hated.
I can see that.
Hated his work. So Buddy Jack Roberts was actually Buddy Roberts and Jerry Brown of the Hollywood Blondes for decades. He had Buddy Roberts there in his territory, and he gave him Buddy Roberts and said, here, work with Buddy. Michael, you do the talking. And they became a sensation from that point. It is one of the few times in wrestling that I could completely mark out for somebody. Everybody on this list, they are my favorite team. So I have people higher, but there was nobody cool. And when it comes to the Rebel Flag thing, man, I agree with them. A lot of fun. It don't play well, but in 1980, it was not the missile heat that it is now. And there's a bunch of African-American folks in the same arenas that I was in, and they loved the Freebirds. I even heard Michael Hayes address it one time, go, you know, we didn't know. 40 years ago, we didn't know what.
Right.
We didn't look at it. It was just a bunch of crazy Southern boys. I wouldn't wear it now, but back then I was probably guilty of wearing it then, you know?
Yeah.
So I love the Freebirds. And Terry Gordy, rest in peace. Outside of Ric Flair, maybe my favorite wrestler of all time. And, you know, he's right there. Terry Gordy, Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair. Love him.
Now, so think about this. Terry Gordy outside the Freebirds. What about a tag team? And they're not on this list. Maybe they should be. But what about Terry Gordy with Dr. Death Steve Williams?
Greatest tag team name in history, because Japanese doesn't interpret the English well. The name of the team in Japan was the Miracle Violence Connection.
Wow. Oh,
independent list. Terry Gordy will have, I don't know where they'll be at, but in the top 5, Terry Gordy will be represented twice.
That's scary.
Freebird, once with Dr. Death Steve Williams. He may make it the 3rd time with Stan Hansen.
Yeah.
So Terry Gordy's going to show a lot.
All right, Randall, let's hear your number 3.
Well, my number 3, I got to have some music for number 3 too. I'm sorry, but it's just not the same. The greatest in-ring tag team wrestler of all time. The greatest mouth in wrestling history. They partnered over time with a couple of different third members, but I particularly would welcome from the dark side, Loverboy Bobby.
Loverboy.
Whatever you want to call Dennis. I blanked on Dennis.
Loverboy Dennis and Beautiful Bobby.
Yeah. And then I include Stan Lane in it because the run was together.
Yep.
That run with Jim Cornette, Bobby Eaton, Stan Lane, Dennis Condrey, it was a run that they did together. But I will tell you, the original version of the Midnight Express was Dennis Condrey, Randy Rhodes, and Norvell Austin. They moved around, and again, they formed in Memphis and was sent to Watts. I was going earlier. They sent Gordy and Hayes to New Orleans because they had another blonde tag team they liked better. That was a guy named Wayne Ferris and Larry Latham. Wayne Ferris became famous as the Honky Tonk Man, and Larry Latham became famous as the Moon Dog. So at the same time, they had them. They had the Midnight. They had a Midnight Express version. They had a version of just craziness. So they send the Midnight Express down to work in Louisiana because somebody else on this list was down there turning it up, and they had to have an opponent. But I think Jim Cornette is JC. God, greatest promo maybe in wrestling. Bobby Eaton, Stan Lane versus Ric Flair and Barry Windham in the UTC Arena Clash of Champions. Greatest live match I've ever watched.
Wow.
It was unreal. Horseman win it, but God, it was so good. There's a point in that match where Windham and Eaton get down on their knees, and Jim Cornette talks about it in his podcast and go, they do it all the time. And they would do a whole wrestling section on their knees, whipping off the rope, backdrops. And at the time, I was like, well, that's a little odd. But then when you hear Jim Cornette talk about it, they were so good that they would challenge themselves to do stuff like that.
Wow.
That was unreal. And Barry Windham, while we don't talk about him a lot, in ring, Barry Windham, when he was young, was as good as anybody in the world. So number 3, I give you the Midnight Express.
Wow. I can't. I mean, I can't. I mean, we're probably going to be the same teams, just a matter. But I can't. You know, my first experience with the Midnight Express was with Dennis Condrey. I knew that there was another version, the one that you mentioned, and then later on Stan Lane. But gosh, you know, I went back to how did they make me feel? I couldn't stand them. I mean, I wanted to punch Jim Cornette. I mean, he literally, even though you know he's just playing a part, and he's doing that today, still on that podcast. I can't even listen to his podcast because I get so mad I want to punch him.
That's me.
But I love it. I want to listen to it, but he goes on these political spills, and I really think that's part. He's still playing the heel, and I literally wanted to see. I wanted to see somebody get a hold of him, and you know, and but I can't. I mean, I can't disagree with it. And you'll kind of understand why when we get through the list.
Go ahead and give us your number 3 then.
Well, my number 3 is not that Express, but it's the other Express that we all know and love, and that's the Rock and Roll Express. So you put those two teams together, that was great. That was great wrestling, and you know they I can remember, just you know because back in the day didn't have cable, didn't have the ability to get pay-per-view. You had to watch that hour-long program that I think it was on Fox. I can't remember who had it out of Chattanooga.
Fox
You
61.
you would get you get the hour-long program, and I could remember when they were feuding. You're not going to get to see them wrestle each other, and it's like who won. I can't wait to find out who won. You know, uh, but Rock and Roll Express. I mean, look, Robert Gibson. Robert Gibson, a little, dry as far as his promo goes. The guy could wrestle. And then you got Ricky Morton. Y'all have to forgive it if you hear a baby. That's that grandbaby. So Ricky Morton, Sale, play the back. You couldn't help but have sympathy for them because they were smaller. They knew how to sell, man. I remember watching them wrestle the Russians, and you're thinking, "My God, the Russians gonna kill these guys," and and it looked like they were, but just innovative, uh, everything. The only problem I have now is that Ricky Morton is still trying to wear the same hairstyle he had back in 1985. I mean, let it go, dude. I mean,
Yeah.
we're in 2022. Uh, Love to hear him even now. Guys still wrestling spots, man, and they don't, they're not the old Rock and Roll Express, but they're not bad.
Randall, how you feel about that?
Well, I'm going to talk more about that feud because I have a feeling I'm going to have some things to say later on.
Okay.
Rock and roll is here to stay, baby.
It was the feud. There's no way you can't have the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express on this list. And it's a feud that covered Mid South Wrestling,
Hmm.
Mid Wrestling, the WCW,
Yes,
all the country as an indie wrestler after they had lost their spotlight. That feud went on for 20 years.
it's awesome, and you were still invested in. Hey, so let me throw something else in. And I was doing a little research, and I never watched the match. I'd love to see it. Saw some magazine pictures. I don't know if it was on Twitter or if it's something I looked up. I did not know the Rock and Roll Express wrestled the British Bulldogs.
I didn't see it, but I did see
I'm in on that.
the Rock and Roll Express made their way around the world 3 times, I bet.
Yeah.
And then you think about the Rock and Roll Express versus they beat the Russians for the World Tag Team Championship in their first appearance in Jim Crockett promotion.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Ric Flair and Ricky Morton had a famous feud in the 80s.
The training garments.
Before the Rock and Roll Express, it was Ricky and Robert Gibson, the Gibson brothers, were a monster old territory wrestling team.
Mm.
Ricky Morton and Ken Lucas held the Southwest Tag Team Championship,
Wow.
the CWA Championships. These guys had successful careers with other tag team partners before they got put together.
Yeah.
And I'm going to end it because we're going to run long if I don't. But I'm going to tell you the story Jerry Lawler told on his podcast before he ended. Because Ricky Morton is the son of a famous referee from the Memphis territory. So now they've got Ricky and Robert there. And Robert Gibson's brother was a better wrestler than either one of them. He was great. Ricky Gibson, unfortunately, had a car wreck. And they're trying to, and Memphis was great for building tag teams. Absolutely the best territory. And Lawler, who was booking at the time, said, "This will be a month, but what kind of gimmick we're going to put them on?" So Ricky Morton said they went to the flea market and bought every bandana, every leopard print, every zebra print they could, had them on their trunks, and showed up as the Rock and Roll Express, and it was born at that point.
Wow.
The only argument I might have is I might think they ought to be higher.
We'll
Wow.
find out here in a few minutes. All
Wow.
right, JJ, number 2.
Number 2. I've got that other express, the Midnight Express with Jim Cornette. So we've talked about them. I of course I like the Rock and Roll Express back then in the day because they were the baby face team, and you wanted to see, they were smaller. Like I said, they were smaller. You feared for their lives, especially the Russians, But then you had the Midnight Express. You had the extra man there. You had Jim Cornette, that evil, slimy. Uh, I could say other things, but Jim Cornette. So he was always, so it was like they were always outnumbered. But the reason I put the Midnight Express where I did is because I appreciate the heelage.
Yeah.
I hated them. I didn't. I didn't like Beautiful Bobby. I didn't understand why his name was Beautiful Bobby because I didn't see anything beautiful about it. He didn't have the physique. His hair looked weird even for 1984. Dennis Condrey, Loverboy. Who's gonna love that guy? He's all hairy and got that beard. I mean, I didn't really see it. I can't hear you, Randall. You must be on mute.
I said, I think that was the point.
Yeah, so it's like, no, these guys are the opposite of what their names. But, I could buy into Sweet Stan. He was a good looking dude when he came in. Jim Cornette was a nut, but to me, they were the best heel tag team in the business at that time. I mean, to me, Russians, yes, but these guys, I mean, I hate Jim Cornette put them over the top, but you wanted to see them lose, but I put them there because you have to look. The whole thing is, you guys have heard it. If you're gonna have baby faces, you gotta have great heels. I loved it when he broke his leg when he fell out of that scaffold. I was in. I'm like, yes, and it was a legit injury.
Bubba Rogers was supposed to catch him.
that was hilarious. And he's like, we couldn't practice it. It's not like you could practice that. But I put them there. I mean, to me, they could work. They knew how to work. Bobby, God rest his soul, left us too early. Hey, another thing about Bobby. I've heard this, of course, none of us you were kind of there. Definitely not me. They said Bobby Eaton was one of the best guys you would ever be around. They said he carried an extra bag everywhere he went with extra everything. And if anybody needed anything, Bobby Eaton had it.
I don't want to derail this, but I was going to try not to, but you brought it up. Now I've got to speak to this. I got to know Bobby really good. Bobby, because I was from Chattanooga, Bobby started here, and he knew it well. That bag weighed every bit of 60 pounds.
You saw that bag. Wow.
And they were socks on one end. They were tape all in it. But down in one of the pockets was penny candy. Like you could go just scoop out. And he'd hand out candy in the locker room. He had utensils eating. If somebody said, you need a knife, I never saw Bobby not have what somebody needed in that bag.
Wow.
I'm going to share a story with you. I was working in Huntsville one night. I made $20 to be on the ring crew and work security. And I was in college, and I got in my Chevette, drove down there, worked, and I didn't have no money. I was broke. And I don't know what made him do it, but he saw me standing there. He goes, are you hungry? And I go, yeah, I'm starving. He goes, well, come back here. And I go back there, and there was 4 or 5 buckets of chicken that people had bought and set out there and kind of catering. Bobby Eaton goes, he's with me. If anybody has a problem with it, he's going to eat.
Nice. Wow. That's
cool. He gave me $20 many nights and said, here, get home. Take your girlfriend out. I had a conversation with his sister not long ago. There's a fan page called Bobby Eaton Memorial, and I went on there and I got to tell the world and his sister how much I thought of him as a person.
Mm-hmm.
it was nice meeting Ric Flair. He was a good guy. It was nice meeting Dusty Rhodes. But as a Christian, as a man who tries to live by faith, I pray I am as good an example of charity and faith as Bobby Eaton was, because that great of a guy.
Wow.
And, it was nothing for him to say, did you eat today? And you go, yeah. And him show back up and have a hot dog and give you a hot dog a little later. Just, that's who he was, man. Nothing
Man,
stopped
I'm glad you shared that, man. That's awesome. That is cool. Huntsville, Alabama's own Bobby Eaton.
All right, Randall, you're number 2.
Well, I think my number 2 probably just going to lead into Jeremy's number 1, just to be honest with you, and get it out of the way and talk about it, because obviously my number 1 is not going to be.
I knew we were heading this way.
Now, in all my days, and I got to work maybe 20 shows a year, worked security, helped the guys in, took them out, set up the ring. So I was nothing in this. I have no claim to fame, but I got to see a lot of wrestling.
Yeah.
Or 2 tag teams that no matter where you were at in that arena, you knew they were headed to the ring. And even the guys out back called it the Road Warrior Pop. That music came on. That place went crazy. Gone Too Soon, Hawk, Animal with Precious Paul. They were a team. Paul was as much a part of this as Hawk and Animal was. I can honestly say, when this is all done 4 weeks from now, that's going to be my number 1 tag team, because I know how many lists they're going to show up on. And they're going to show up on every list we make.
Yeah, I mean, right.
But the reason my number 1 is over the Road Warriors, because they had the same kind of pop. It was just about 20 years younger and female. But the Road Warriors are single-handedly the greatest tag team in wrestling history. Their run in the NWA was from Georgia as the National Tag Team Champions. They were gone before the WCW. They might be the only team that might be the only list they don't make is the WCW list.
I'd be right.
Great work at New Japan Pro Wrestling and IWGP Hero. AWA World Tag Team Champions. Of course, WWE Tag Team Champions. Only team in history to hold the WCW, AWA, and WWE World Tag Team Champions. I give you Hawk and Animal, Road Warriors. And I don't care if WWE called them the Legion of Doom. That's the Road Warriors.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to go to Jeremy and ask his opinion, but I don't think I should at the moment. So, Randall, we'll just go with your number 1 pick now.
My number 1 pick is because they were NWA wrestling, tag team wrestling. For over 2 decades, they represented it. And still to this day, they represent tag team wrestling. They are the excellence of tag team wrestling. Everybody talks about that Road Warrior pop. It was great and it was unique. But you put 5,000 post-16-year-old girls in an arena and you walk Robert Gibbs Orton down. It is a sound that you will never forget. They went on to do great things outside of the NWA. The match with the Russians is the greatest intro match. Walk into the promotion, win the NWA World Tag Team Championships. It was a great match. If you haven't seen it, go to YouTube and watch it. I got one other reason I want to talk about them as my number 1 team, and that goes to this. They feuded everybody. The Midnight Express, the Horsemen. They were a team that you could plug in with anyone. No matter how bad they were, you could put them in there and they were the baby face. And when Ricky Morton would be getting destroyed, and he'd be there, and Jim Cornette talks about it in his podcast, and I've seen it personally. Ricky Morton, 15 minutes into the match, would crawl on his knees and grab the bottom rope and the second rope, and he'd reach his hand out towards the first row, and he would just go, and that place would just go done. And he would sit there, and he'd look at the crowd, and he would be like, someone help me, help me. And then the hot tag to Robert Gibson. Absolutely nothing like it. Do I think they're the greatest working tag team? No. Do I think they're probably the biggest drawing tag team? Yes. Do I think they're the biggest, most popular tag team? No, because I think that's the Road Warriors at their height.
Yeah.
But it is legendary, and I will tell you why I think that they went away for a while. And everybody knows I love Dusty Rhodes. I love Dusty. I love you, Dusty. God rest your heart. Dusty was the booker in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling would run 2 shows. One would be their A, be Charlotte, Norfolk. The B-Town would be headlined by the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express.
Mm-hmm.
Dusty actually got his butt tapped because the Rock and Roll Express was outdrawing money of Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair at the top of the A card. And they packed people in. And I don't know, but aren't they headlining the Ric Flair show, or do we not know this yet?
I don't, that's the first thing that I heard. And then I don't think so. I haven't heard otherwise.
They were just on AEW television not long ago. They're still relevant. They were at an autograph signing in Knoxville, and they said the line went all the way out of the Civic Coliseum. The longest up there was to see the Rock and Roll Express. And I'm not a fan of the Rock and Roll Express. I used to say I am the anti-Rock and Roll Express because I was a 25-year-old male that listened to heavy metal. But how from their place, there's only 2 tag teams that was every list I made. There was only 2 tag teams at 1 and 2, and that was the Road Warriors and the Rock and Roll Express.
All right, Jeremy, your thoughts on that real quick.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up about them selling out the B show, because I was going to mention that. You Randall, you had more details, so I'm glad you was able to throw that in there. But so the noise from the crowd is because it was all those 14, 15-year-old girls and the high pitched scream that even on TV you could hear. You could hear it.
They used to say around the arena that the Rock and Roll Express put more girls into puberty than Elvis.
I mean, hey, may be right. Well, I guess there's no suspense here. There's not really any suspense. Y'all flip out if I said Wahoo McDaniel and I don't know, Ronnie Garvin or something, Manny Fernandez, Rick Rude, somebody like that. My number one, and again, yes. Listen, you got to think about and talking about how it makes you feel. So these guys they never needed a title. Although I always wanted them to win one. They had the 6-man with Dusty. They carried that for a good while. But the Road Warriors, there was just something about that Fox 61 hour-long show that I got to watch, that studio show. When that music hit, and you knew the match was going to be over because it was enhancement talent or jobbers. The match was over before the music stopped, and there was just something about the fact that they came in and they just mopped the floor with people, and you believed it because these guys were legitimately tough, huge, we referenced it with the Warlord and the Barbarian, that little feud when Hawk was injured. They had the bench press contest. Y'all remember that?
Mhm.
Uh, you know, the you wanted, it was kind of like if you were getting picked on at school, because I was picked on at school, and and you had certain group, and then you had this other bad dude, and you're like, I wish they'd pick on them, and they would whip their rear end. I like to see them I mean, that was one of those things where you wanted the Horseman or somebody to pick on them because you wanted to see them get their comeuppance, from the Road Warriors. You go all the way through. Randall, I agree with you. They're going to be on other lists. New Japan. Uh,
Yes.
I, s- I don't know where this match was. I didn't go too far, but Animal press slamming Hulk Hogan was pretty awesome. I saw a video clip of that. But Japan, they were huge. AWA, they were huge. When they made an appearance in the NWA, you go on into WWF, I still don't think they got what they uh, deserved in the WWF. But my number one is Hawk, Animal, the Road Warriors. And hey, you might want to throw Rocco in there also. throw Rocco in. Y'all don't know what I'm talking about when I say Rocco, do you? Paul Ellering, great manager.
Well, y'all's list are pretty close to being the same, 5 through 1. So,
They did hold the NWA tag team titles. Um, and,
That's right, they did.
and the problem was, and Howie, I'll shut up in a second. I just want to make one comment about this. The reason it was hard to give them that, this was always what you heard backstage. You can't, it was like giving Andre the Giant the World Wrestling Championship. Who's
Hmm.
going to beat Andre? If
Right,
you give the titles to the Road Warriors, who's going to beat the Road Warriors?
right.
And I'll also bring up the team, and we talked about them, and I might have them too low at number 4. The team that got the most, besides the Powers of Pain, out of the Road Warriors was the Midnight Express. Those guys would fly and bump all over the place for the Express, but
Yep.
it was just hard. It was hard to find teams that could match up with Hawk and Animal. I mean, it was almost impossible. So, I did love the Dusty Magnum TA versus the Road Warriors feud. That was great. So
Wow.
that's when
They
they
just
really,
still spike into Dusty's eyes, and
fucking.
they got fired over that too. Eventually,
I'm really surprised that nobody mentioned the 4 Horsemen all together as far as being a tag team. I know they was mentioned kind of separate, but not really being, y'all mentioned some trios, as they call it now, teams, the
Hmm.
Russians and all that, but nobody really mentioned the 4 Horsemen. So did y'all really consider them as all 4 being a tag team together, or was that even remotely thought about?
I'll go first, and you can answer again. I'll go back. To me, the Horseman was. Uh, I did have the Horseman when I put the Anderson brothers in there, because the original Horseman, Ric Flair, Ole Anderson, Arn Anderson, after Gene had retired, and Tully Blanchard. So I guess I didn't say the Horseman, but in my head, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew is the Horseman. I know
Yeah.
he brought up Tully and Arn, who were the Horsemen. I think the better tag team was Flair and Wyndham, but no, I never thought about. I always think of them as individuals and not really as much as tag. I even think, like I said, Arn Anderson said it himself on his podcast. He goes, Ric Flair was the greatest world heavyweight champion of all time. I am the greatest world TV champion of all time. And I
Hmm.
carry the title just like Ric Flair carried the world title. He said, I had a responsibility. I was the co-main event or the match before the main event. My job was to go over, get over, and prepare the crowd for Flair. And he said it too. He said, my job was to take pinfalls for the Horsemen. And go back. Arn Anderson took more elbows and pinfalls than any man in the history of the world. So him and Dusty started. I think there was 50 War Games, and him and Dusty started like 47 of them. So the one team, I had Gordy and Williams on my list, and we talked about that. And I know it kind of previewed that. The other team that I didn't know, see, there's Iron and Tully on my list at number 8, and I kind of marked it off. The other team that I didn't know what to do with, that I wanted to put on this list, and you jokingly said it, but Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude was a monster team with a long run in the NWA before WCW. Matter of fact, they stole the NWA tag team titles. There was one that I wanted to put on there. The Interns was another one, another mass team out of Chattanooga. But the one that I didn't put on the list, that someday I'm going to go back and look at this list and say, hey, you're an idiot, was Robert Fuller, Colonel Parker, as you know him, and Jimmy Golden, who Bunkhouse Buck. But Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden probably held more regional tag team titles in the NWA than any team alive. And then in the WCW, that was, of course, Colonel Parker and Bunkhouse Buck. Sorry.
Jeremy, your thoughts on the Four Horsemen?
Now, I'll be honest with you, Howie. I always thought of them as Ric Flair world champion. And then back, Randall referenced it. And then you had the world TV champion, Arn Anderson. Did Tully held that too? Right.
Yeah,
so
Tully
then
for a long time.
So I always kind of thought of it like you always had two individual titles in a tag team. So that would be Arn or Ole and Arn, and then Arn and Tully. And I never thought of Flair. I mentioned him and Valentine. But Flair, I'd always thought of him as he was the world champion, on his own.
Instead of seeing them as a team, you more or less saw them as a group of four just kind of hanging out and probably partying and drinking beer.
It was well, that's actually what they did. So yes.
Yeah.
Room 806 in the Marriott.
Funny if you'd have said bring the top 10 factions of all time, that would have been.
That's we've
been on this.
We got a lot more coming up.
Oh boy,
that may be one of them.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple quick questions for you. I know we're running long. Get off here real quick. So, which tag team out of your top 5 had the best entrance music?
I'll take that one. Road Warriors, hands down. Now, let me say that. Let me say Road Warriors because Iron Man got me. It still does. Love Iron Man. No, that's before copyright got them, I guess. Number 2, Midnight Express. I love it. I go crazy when FTR comes out. That's the kind of the modern version of that. Loved it. Love it.
I agree with Jeremy, but I'm going to throw one more at him. And I did not enjoy, and I played it because I figured I wouldn't get copyright on the back. But Michael P.S. Hayes dancing on the top rope, looking over at Kevin Carey, Von Erich, while Freebird plays ground. It's there. I love that Horseman intro that doesn't get, where the horses make the noise and it's like,
yeah.
But by far, And when he was talking about it, I got goosebumps. There's nothing like Iron Man, and just like
Yeah.
And they didn't walk to the ring; they sprinted, and you knew
Oh, somebody was gonna get killed.
I remember being backstage, and there was two. Rocky was one of them. Y'all remember Rocky?
Yeah.
And I don't remember who the other was. And I was backstage, and I was like, I said something because a lot of times you'd say, "Oh, who you got tonight?" And I looked at Rocky and said, "Who you got?" And he goes, "I'm taking the ass whipping tonight. I got the Road Warriors."
They knew it.
He's like, I just might as well get ready to go to the hospital or something. And they're gonna. He goes, and they don't know how not to hurt you. That's just who they are. That's all.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, go ahead. Go ahead, Howie.
No, go ahead. I got another question. So go.
Go ahead. I had a random thought. We'll hold it. I might bring it up later.
Out of your top 5, which tag team had the best finishing move?
Ooh.
Hmm.
I tell you who had the worst finishing move. My number 1 with that double drop kick is about as lame as me going to.
I agree.
Yeah. 55 years old. I don't like the Doomsday Advice. I'm not crazy about it. As physical as the Road Warriors were, that just seemed like a end. Totally. You know what? I'm gonna go with the Alabama Slam, the Midnight Express. Bobby off the top row with that leg was.
That's not bad.
Pretty, and you know what? They don't praise him. They do like Jimmy Superfly Snuka, who come off chest first. I'm not sure coming off with the leg and giving the leg drop, hitting harder on your body and tougher technically to do than just get on the top. Because you think about it, if you're going to, every dad that's ever had a kid has gave them the Jimmy Snuka splash on the couch, and it's easy to somebody. But now you go and jump down with your leg on top of a man, you're 230 pounds, and he never hurt anybody. So I'll go with Bobby Eaton in the Alabama Jam.
I mentioned it early. Give me a slingshot suplex and give me a spine buster. I'm in. That's by far the best. I would put the Doomsday Device number 3. But yeah, probably the slingshot suplex for me was always. I loved it. I don't know why I hated Tully, but I love the slingshot suplex. And I see it now. If I ever see it now, and you rarely do, I mean, I'm gonna use the term. I pop for it. I'm like, oh wow, slingshot suplex.
Good deal, guys. Randall, you got any closing thoughts on your top 5?
Oh, and I'm gonna run it to y'all. We talked about a lot of tag teams here, and a lot of them wrestled each other. Is there a tag team match that you never saw in your top 10? Or anybody in my top 10 that you'd like to see? And I do have one, so I'll go first. I would have loved to seen the Briscoe brothers versus the Road Warriors. Because the Briscoe brothers could keep up with the Road Warriors. You could have legitimately sold that as a tough guy contest.
I would dare say on that one that if that was a shoot fight,
I'm taking
I have too. Yeah. I think that would be, no doubt.
So is that one of those matches that you'd have to have an ambulance on standby just in case?
Yes, if they broke real, Hawk and Animal was going to the hospital.
So they may have wrestled. I never saw it. So what about the Rock and Roll Express versus the Freebirds? They probably wrestled. However, I never saw that.
Here's the thing about you can't even find that one on YouTube. And it was in the old Mid-South.
Right.
The Freebirds moved on to WCCW with the Von Erichs. But I'm pretty sure when they were shooting back that somewhere at a Superdome show, the Freebirds wrestled but that should have been
That'd be.
feud. That should have been a huge feud.
No, I'd love that. Now I'm in on that.
I was also fantasy booking crossing tag team eras, and I came up with, how would you like to see FTR versus the Midnight Express? That's all. I'm done. Howie, back to you. You're the host.
All right, guys. Great show. Enjoyed it. Learned a lot today about a lot of different tag teams. Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
No, I was going to agree with you. I mean, Randall brought the history, man. I mean, I don't know it. I just, but it was interesting. Love the story about Bobby. So it was a lot of fun.
Hey, and isn't it funny how many of these great tag team wrestlers were in other tag teams and were great too? Like Dennis Condrey and Phil Hickerson is a legendary Memphis team. These guys could work as tag teams, could just do it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had one more question, but I'll ask it real quick. Which ones of your top 5, which of the tag teams could have broke off and been the best individual wrestler?
Ooh, Jeremy, I got this one. I'm going to go first. And it almost happened. When Tully and Iron left for the WWE, Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane almost got inducted into the Four Horsemen. I think you could have took those two and made them horsemen in a heartbeat. Bobby Eaton also won the World TV Championship, won the U.S. Heavyweight Championship, had a great tag team with Sir Robert, whatever his name is, was there. Steven Regal.
Yes.
The Blue Bloods. Was in the most underrated faction of all time. Larry Zbyszko, Bobby Eaton, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Food, the Dangerous Alliance. So I'm going to tell you right now, I think Bobby Eaton, given the right mouthpiece like James J. Dillon, could have been a world champion. And I'll also say it's a shame, a disgrace, that Terry Gordy only held the UWF World Championship. He should have held it. If he hadn't done what he done and died at 40, that man would have made a great NWA champion, great WWE champion. I think about, what if Terry Gordy never got sick? What could they have done with Terry Gordy versus Hulk Hogan around WrestleMania 5?
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
Terry Gordy was making, his family watches this show and still in the area, so I don't mean to, but this has been publicized. Terry, the Road Warriors, they were making $10,000 a week in Japan. And he wouldn't leave Japan to come, be a world champion or be a U.S. champion. He did hold the UWF, Universal Wrestling Federation, and he is a 2-time, no, it's not New Japan, it's the other one. What's All Japan Wrestling? Their world champion is called the Triple Crown Championship, and he held that world championship twice. So Terry Gordy should have been NWA champion, even if it's for a month, like they did with other people. Terry Gordy was, God, he was Terry Gordy. I'm sorry.
No, it's awesome. I mean, I agree with you completely. For me, of course, my top 5's got Jack Briscoe in there. Of course, he was a legit. Now, you're asking who could have been. We know Jack Briscoe was. Now, from everybody that's left, in mine, Arn Anderson being the greatest TV champion ever, and I agree with that. I really think in a different situation, Ric Flair not being Ric Flair, I think Arn Anderson could have been a fantastic world champion, because here's the thing: he can wrestle. He he could cut a promo. He was physically imposing. I mean, he really was. He's a rough guy, but the guy could talk. So in a different world, and you just have Arn Anderson being Arn Anderson out there without Ric Flair being present. Arn Anderson could have made a great world champion in that era for the NWA.
Greatest money feud to never happen would have been Arn Anderson to turn babyface on Ric Flair
Oh
and
my gosh.
win the WCW NWA world title.
My gosh, they would tore it down.
Yeah. And the other storyline would have been that I think if they split the Freebirds up, they split everybody up. I think a feud on a national stage of turn whichever one of them you want, turn heel. Ricky and Robert feuding after all their success as a tag team. Tell the storyline. Robert Gibson, tired of Ricky always being the star. I'm angry. I'm upset with you. I'm over you. Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty. You tell that story, that draws a lot of money too.
That was one of the questions I thought about asking, but I didn't. Was out of your top 5 tag teams, who was the workhorse out of who was more of a workhorse than the other one? The Marty Jannetty / Shawn Michaels type deal. But I didn't ask it, so if anybody wants to comment real quick, go ahead. But I know we need to get off here.
Hey, Jeremy, the text you just sent is going to be a top 5 in my independent. When we get to the WA, they may be right there with the Freebirds and the Road Warriors.
Good deal, guys. Great show. I enjoyed it. Join us next time. It will be the WWF/E or WWWF, tag teams of top 10. It'll be the same way. 10 through 6 will be a quick go through, and 5 through 1 will be the heavy discussion part.
Well, everybody knows it's going to be Chainsaw Charlie and Terry Funk or Big Foley.
Well, I thought it was going to be the Moondogs myself, the Moondog Spot and all them.
Moondogs.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and say this one is going to be tough for me.
WWE.
I think I'm going to feel the same way about this as you were about what we just covered. So now we're going all the way up to present day, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. It's going to be tough.
I made my list just like off the top of my head, and it really does get tough. My list tended to be a little modern day heavy, to be honest. Like I was more historical with this other one, but they've been so many great recent tag teams in the WWE. And I'm by recent, I mean 2000 until now.
Oh yeah.
I was just like, well, I left this one off. And I'll just go ahead and say it now because they will be in my top 10. I made my first list and I got finished and looked at it, and the Dadgum Heart Foundation wasn't on it.
Oh my gosh.
I just hope one of y'all have the Bushwhackers on there myself, but that's just my opinion.
Hey, they made my NWA. They'd be in my NWA 15.
As the sheep herders?
Yes. Great show, great idea from Howie Chaney. We'll see you next week. The WWE. Chainsaw Charlie, Mick Foley, top tag team of all time. We'll see you next week. And don't forget, vote for Best of Chattanooga, Davis, Kessler, and Davis on Cherokee Boulevard in Chattanooga. Good night. God bless. Drive safe. 2-drink minimum, and we're out.